Senator Ricketts, welcome.
Thank
and
you,
welcome to the committee. All of our new members, welcome to the committee. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Goffman. It's an honor to be on this committee, and I love being on this committee because you know why? I get to talk about ethanol. I love talking about ethanol. So ethanol.
Senator's time has expired. Just kidding. Just kidding.
So ethanol saves consumers money at the pump, right? It helps clean up our environment, and it's great for creating jobs in America. First of all, ethanol helps with gas prices. So last summer, E15 users in some areas of this country were able to save up to $1 a gallon. And I think the average was about 16 cents. But last time I filled up was just with E10 back in Nebraska. I think I was saving about almost 50 cents a gallon on filling up my car. So it saves consumers money. Second, it reduces carbon emissions. Blended ethanol fuels reduced about 1 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gas emissions from 2008 to 2020. And the USDA data shows that ethanol reduces greenhouse gases by about 43%. And then third, ethanol is great for our families here in Nebraska. Our 24 plants creates about 1,400 jobs and boosts our state economy by about $4.5 billion. And that also rolls over to our farm families as well, and all the ancillary jobs that are created. And in fact, one of the things I've heard from people too is, hey, I don't want to replace fuel for food, but actually the byproducts of ethanol is distillers grains, which goes to be feed livestock, cattle, pigs, chickens, which then we consume for food. So it actually doesn't take away from our food supply. And actually, we did a test on E30 that the EPA allowed at the state level. So we ran E30 in vehicles, state vehicles that were produced after 2001, and had a phenomenal success with that, and potential for even more environmental cleanup and more cost savings. Last year, the Biden administration allowed E15 to be sold year-round, and Americans benefited in the three ways I just outlined. If confirmed, will you commit that the EPA will provide the required waivers so that E15 will be available throughout this upcoming summer driving season?
Senator Ricketts, thank you for that question and for that overview of the benefit of ethanol. I know that my boss, Administrator Regan, agrees with you and agrees that the RFS program should really be implemented to meet its objectives. It turns out that the decision to grant the use of E15 over the course of the summer season under the Clean Air Act, that's a game time decision. That is to say, we look at the data right at the time we're making the decision before we make the decision. So I don't have the authority under the Clean Air Act to commit on March 1st to a decision that won't really come, if it comes at all, till May 15th. However, I hope you see that from the decision we made last year, we're certainly open to and really focused on what's happening in the market, what's happening with supply, and working with our own within our own team and with DOE, so that if and when we get to the point where we have to do what we did last summer, we will be in a position to do it again.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, for consumers and creating confusion when we have the off-again policy, so something that would be more permanent would be great as well. Also, I'm glad you mentioned the RFS. I'm concerned that the EPA's proposed renewable fuel standards set rule does not reflect actual market conditions, specifically when we're talking about renewable diesel. The EPA proposed to keep the RFS biomass-based diesel requirements below 3 billion gallons in 2025. However, more than 3.6 billion gallons of advanced biomass-based diesel was produced in 2022, and more than 5.9 billion gallons may be produced by 2025. How do you reconcile that the industry is producing more, but it's not reflected in the RFS?
That's a really good question, and it's a question we're looking at directly because we've gotten a lot of comment focusing on this question since the proposal, and we will be addressing it when we issue the final set rule in mid-June.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Goffman.
to Senator Ricketts and
Senator Ricketts.
Senator
Okay,
Sullivan.
go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Goffman, I want to kind of build on what Senator Mullen was talking about earlier. One of the things that concerns me as well is managing the ability to, as we talked about earlier, the demand for electric cars and power generation, but also transmission lines is another big deal. That if we don't have transmission lines, it doesn't really matter. If you, look, for example, where a lot of wind energy potential in this country is, it's in the middle part of the country where the demand is going to be on the coast and so forth. And then, of course, just making sure we've got base load power as well. Actually 2 years ago, Nebraska, the amount of wind energy generated actually exceeded the amount of coal energy generated. So we're heading in a direction for more renewable energy. But it does raise the question about base load and making sure that we have enough power to be able to provide to folks and not have the rolling blackouts, which is something that, again, in my lifetime has not happened until very recently. So can you talk a little bit about reliable energy and electricity and how, it's important here, and what, how do you think about this when you're thinking about this critical need to develop environmental regulations that are impacting our electric utilities? How does that play into when you're doing your modeling to make sure that we have proper power generation and proper base load to be able to continue to provide the growing needs of this country for electricity?
Well, thank you for asking that question. And as I said to Senator Capito, whenever we do power sector regulations, we look at cost, impact on consumers and businesses, and reliability with the same level of focus we do at the pollution reduction we're aiming to achieve. I've never encountered a Clean Air Act provision that authorizes the agency to shut down sources. And in fact, as I was mentioning, we've got that problem statement right in front of us as we're endeavoring to finalize the Good Neighbor Plan. We proposed the Good Neighbor Plan, and we got a lot of feedback from reliability entities saying that what you've proposed is going to put a burden on the very sources that we may need in order to ensure grid reliability. So when we, having been given that information by the experts in reliability, we are going to be addressing the challenge they put to us, or the information they shared with us. We're going to be addressing that in the final rule.
Yeah.
So the reliability issue comes to us on a rule-by-rule basis. And fortunately, the Clean Air Act, by design of Congress, the Clean Air Act authorizes us, even requires us, to ensure that whenever we set standards and define compliance, we include sufficient flexibility so that grid operators and generators can respond to the reliability needs of the grid.
Yeah, now, you made a comment about shutting down utilities. The EPA's, though, regulations can have that effect when you put on regulations, especially, we've talked a little about state implementation plans versus the federal implementation plans. And the experience in my state was some of the regulations can be so onerous that, in effect, even though you were not shutting down the utility, that's what is going to happen. And then, of course, with all the consequences that go along with that. So what is are there specific models you're using when you're saying, hey, this is how much power generation is going to come offline, or the potential impact, or are there models that you said wherever you're regulating this rule will allow the certain sources of utilities to be able to continue to provide electricity?
We do modeling that predicts or projects. Predict is an overstatement. It projects shutdowns. But that's just the beginning of the inquiry when we see those results. We then consult with and engage with reliability or grid operators to get an assessment of whether those possible shutdowns will result in reliability problems. And so I point you to rulemakings that the Office of Air and Radiation has done, where we have added provisions to ensure that if in reality a source is going to shut down or have to go offline to install pollution controls in circumstances when doing so would threaten reliability, we've added additional provisions to allow those sources or those grid operators to avoid that. I don't want to quite say it's case by case, but we work with the particularities of each rule and each area of the country that may be affected by a rule that we have proposed and then work on finalizing.
Thank you.